Biographical films as of late have become all the rage lately, with many different figures of the past have their own stories told for the medium of motion pictures, documented work or television, and can vary from the forms that are shown from the likes of musicians like Queen, Elton John, Amy Winehouse, and loads more to the likes of political figures like the Clintons, JFK, and Dick Cheney, even to some other well-known figures such as the Von Erichs with Iron Claw, Private Doss from Hacksaw Ridge, and Oscar Schindler from Schindler's List, where many have had a degree of success or critique either in the form that they tell their story of being authentic or fabricated, or to the person they were and how they were remembered, and that is the focus of today's review, as we are talking about the story of the man who became known, who labeled himself as Death, the Destroyer of Worlds, as we're talking about the award-winning biographical film about the man known as J. Robert Oppenheimer in the Christopher Nolan directed film Oppenheimer. And I am here to ask the question and the likes of wondering if the film about the creation of the atomic bomb is a booming success or just a complete bust. Well, thankfully, it is more in the former half, as even with a lengthy runtime, this is one of the most well-made biographical films about the creation of a weapon of mass destruction and the consequence of one responsible, and we will talk on this film below and my thoughts and opinions on the matter.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
So a lot of time with film when it comes to being made about biographical movies, there's always a case that in order to build on a character is to learn of their life and to examine and try and recreate the tales and moments in time of what those people experienced in the past. We see this with musicians like Bohemian Rhapsody, where it built up to the finale of Live Aid, Michael Collins helping in the fight back against the British in the 1916 Rising, or even sometimes like the Weird Al biographical film, where it have a sense of some creative additions where it will give some truths and then add some odd comedic outcomes that only would fit in the mold for a Weird Al biofilm. And sometimes if you have the accurate forms and do it well, it will be a case by case basis that some will work well to the accuracy and some will be affected by creative changes that will make things debatable. One such example being the Amy Winehouse biofilm Back to Black, where there's a mixed array of the portrayal of Amy's dad, or likes of the Elvis film being told from the perspective of his manager. But when it comes to the person that may not be as heavily known, J. Robert Oppenheimer, it takes a master craftsman like Christopher Nolan to find the right form to give the inventor his due diligence with a plot and focus as such. During World War II, Lieutenant General Leslie Groves Jr., and this played by Matt Damon, appoints physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, played by Cillian Murphy, to work on the top secret Manhattan Project. Oppenheimer and a team of scientists spend years designing and developing the atomic bomb. Their work comes to fruition on July 16, 1945, as they witness the world's first nuclear explosion, which forever changed the course of history. Now, in the case of these biographical film, it is based on the form of a book of American Prometheus, which is a novel of the recounting of his life and the creation of the bomb that changed history. And from the research analysis of historical experts that I've looked into before writing this review, it seems to be one of the most accurate retellings of a life story told to screen, and they did not skip out any of the details, and they went cover to cover putting all the details into the story, and I think that it helps to give the creator powerful destruction the detailed story it deserves. But the score wise on this one, I'm going to give it like an 8.5 to a 9, just small nitpicks, but I'll get into it in the critiques area later.
Do it all over, he'd do it all the same.
Now of course, like the other big film in this double bill review, both of said movies have seen a massive array of big name stars that will want to have their presence in the project. And while I could go through every single one of them, there is a lot of them that don't have as big a presence as the select few I'm going to be focused on here. So in terms of this one, I'm going to mainly focus on the main group and lump most of the others in the roundup of the side characters like I did with the other review, as some have more of a presence and development than others, but I'll go focus on them in this particular section. So we of course start with the title character himself, and that is with J. Robert Oppenheimer, who in this is portrayed by Irish actor Cillian Murphy. Now the film is the massive focus on the likes of this character in particular, from the retelling of the story of how he got into the realm of science and physics, and how himself and a massive group of scientists from all fields would come together to create a massive weapon of mass destruction, and the following outcome and effects of the whole ordeal, and told from the two-story perspective of a hearing that he was interviewed and investigated in front of, and a department talking on the possible internal conflict. It's best to sense that if you get the performance and the character right, then it helps to sell the whole life story that you try and cast to portray a person. If you cast a person who isn't, then it's already a problem, but it is not an issue when it comes to this portrayal, as you found the perfect representation of the destroyer of worlds. And Murphy really provides such a layered performance of a man who goes beyond the realm of plausibility to create something bigger than any of them could imagine, and the consequences that being blinded by potential ends up becoming a wake-up call and concerned reality of the aftermath, that you feel the sense of being in the mind of creating the powerful weapon with unknown potential, the personal story of life and relationships he experienced in his past, and all the other elements of following from the archives of his life. I think they delivered a performance as well engaging and really see their reasoning of the approach of creation and the effect of the work that comes from it, I think it helped to excel this movie with a strong leading performance in the film with some really great performers. I agree in the sense that his Oscar win for said role is honestly well deserving of it, because, you know, Cillian Murphy is a great actor, and I think he finally deserved his Oscar after all this time. Speaking of another Oscar winner from a strong performance with this movie, we are talking about the focus of the other side of the coin in this story perspective, as it jumps between two perspectives of the film with Oppie's in colour and this part in black and white, and we're talking on the politician and hearing led by the man known as Lewis Strauss, who was played by Robert Downey Jr. The perspective of this character is in the realm of how he worked and offered a career for Robert in the past, where he offered an aspect of one of his institutes, but things turned a little sour as time went on, and where the focus, as I said, part of this movie is with the hearing of the outcome of the accused and the possibility of position in a political power role, and where most of the last third of the movie is centered on. It's a case that while this section is a lot of talking and political discourse, I think the way that they present Strauss is well defined and executed strongly, as you can see from the performances and charisma that he's trying to exhume, and the hearing that is trusting faith in someone that may not be trusted to their past, who they once considered a colleague, in the sense of mind games, where you feel you want to hate the guy, but you can see through it all that it's the approach that anyone would take for power. And I think through all this, that while a lot of political jargon and discussion can bore the eyes off me, and even through all the last hour or so being just more of a talking piece, I actually felt engaged listening to it and entertained from the outcomes and the performance of said project, because they have someone like RDJ who will bring a personality and presence to a room where the concept may not be the most appealing aspect to me, but from the right performance it makes it more engaging, and the performance of Strauss is really well done and very well casted. So now we move on to the first of the two leading ladies before we return to one more man in a suit, and this is one that tells a little bit of a sad reality from the stories from the past, and is in the form of the woman that becomes the lady of the destroyer of worlds, and as with Oppenheimer's wife of Kitty. So Kitty comes into play about near the end of the first hour or so, and they are the one that lead to the help and the focus and keep things straight when at points seem a little dire for the man leading the project, but in a reverse form. She is also dealing with her own demons that she will find in the bottom of a bottle. It's a tragic aspect of one of her stories was that I was thinking her whole element was she was going to be like a narrative, that she was a chronic alcoholic and all of her story was going to be because that's what I got from a bit of the first part of her appearance in the movie. But it does pick up, it comes into play a little later when she gets herself a little better and more focused in helping keep Robert on the ball when tragedy in his life strikes, but she does pick it up by the second half when all comes together and becomes a vessel of defense for her husband of his past and his actions, and in all sense it's a strong performance moment in the latter half, and you know, it's done well by Emily Blunt. She is a little bit absent in the beginning part, of course, but it does make up for in the end, and it would have been nice to see more of her, to be fair, like a bit more like a backstory aesthetic, but how much they have as a presence and not overly wasting actors with just far range. I think they do well for it. It's kind of a little underused, but you get the gist. And as for the other woman in Robert's life, we have the woman that we would have sense of a relationship with the short period of time at the beginning, and that is the woman known as Jean Tatlock, who is played by Florence Pugh. Now this is the focal love interest for the first part of the movie that sees them meet at a party and may get to know each other just a little bit too much.
Sex.
And then the likes of their relationship or affair of sorts are a bit of a here, there, and everywhere situation that somewhat ends in a tragedy, so to say. I think in all sense, I was wondering if there was a lot more to the likes of this relationship affair, as it's brought up in the second half in the interview process, in a kind of weird aspect as well. And once Kitty comes into play, she kind of just disappears from more of the outcome, and I wonder if there was more to the whole relationship than what was presented in the small amounts of content we shown, but it's really hard to say. No, she didn't like flowers. I do say that the performance and scenes are decently filmed and shot, but there's a kind of a little amount of substance that come from some of these scenes besides learning of this active mind and the quote of I have become deaf. But I think the thing for the amount of screen focus she has, she does have a really strong, decent performance. Like Florence Pugh does really good performances in movies, but I feel it may have needed a little more substance, but it's hard to tell how they would have done so. Depends probably how much they really delved into in the book or about their past lives, but who knows, may need to read the book. The last of the cast I'm going to give a bit of most of a general focus to is with a character that has a fair amount of presence in the movie. That has come the man that assigns Oppenheimer his position on the Manhattan Project. That's General L. Groves, and this played by Matt Damon. This is the character in the past essentially gets the main focus character on board to develop the project, create a weapon and possible human destruction due to his level of intellect and having the expertise to get the job done for the government to help against the ongoing conflict in the world at the time. As I mentioned, this is a World War II film, and in probably case they're going to use it against the invaders kind of thing, all that aspect. The likes of Damon's performance is honestly a not bad portrayal, and is one that pops up here and there throughout the first half of the project, up to I'd say around the testing of the actual bomb, and then kind of disappears afterwards, but he's there when he's needed and provides some sense of a role to the whole ordeal and the odd funny joke delivery in a serious film. But overall, I think he's fine in that role, and he he hasn't served the amount of screen time he had well. And, I wouldn't mind a bit more of him, but, I think he did well enough with his performance. So those were like 5 of the ones that I would give a main focus to, because when it comes to the rest of the cast, it is difficult to really delve into a lot of them, as this movie is stacked. Like, really stacked. If you look on, like, the whole, like, kind of IMDb casting list, just constant huge names. And to give everyone a focus, this review would probably be as long as the actual movie that's out 3 hours. But this has a big cast of some well-known names and previous collaborators from the director, with names like, Kenneth Branagh, Rami Malek, Emma Dumont, Josh Peck, Jack Quaid, Gary Oldman, Josh Hartnett, and so many more characters that it's hard to remember if they had much of a focus or in for a scene or two, and that was it. Now, since they do their job perform as well, even the likes of where in the film they were focused on, the only ones I really know kind of a massive presence, like that had like a little bit of a focus in the story, is Branning's one as a professor in the beginning and little bits in the middle of the movie, and Rami Malek near the end of the film with the whole hearing. Some focus the picture at different points, but I give the props and efforts of the casting choices and the roles they played all the same. That if I do not know how much of a presence they have, I think it was so well done all the same. I don't think it's like terrible. But overall with the characters to play, I think this works well when the main focus characters work really well and are actually deserve the award recognition they got. And in some sense that while there is a bit of nitpicking here and there, and the likes of some performances and some wanting a little more of them or some more development, just a little bit, I think they'll still do a great job overall. And I think that even in a film with some big name stars in every scene, they all work well, deliver some great performances, and help sell the concept from beginning to end. So the score wise on the characters, I'm going to give an 8 to an 8.5 for that one. I think it works well for them. So on the basis of story and characters out of the way, we move into the focus of the main world we experience in this title, and that comes in the realm of the presentation. The likes of this presentation for most reviews I do is I care about the world and visuals shown to us, and in the case of this one, I can at least appreciate that it's something a little bit different in the realm of it being a biographical film and set in a time period that its location and placement of big scenes is decent and not the usual jargon of the generic cities and maybe an aspect to tell don't show mentality. But with this one, it is a show don't tell, as while some elements are brought up in the hearing and the interview interrogation and seeing things unfold and see more in the form of through the eyes of the main lead is interesting. That being focused on the goal in mind and fearing of being a bit too big to fail shows its presence in some locales like established universities, some hints of the suburbs, and then some massive testing facilities in the outskirts of New Mexico. And while there may be moments that it's not showing too much, it still feels a bit more fresh than the usual outcome with biographical films where the whole glitz and glamour kind of aesthetic. The same I can say as well about the use of the visuals in the film, that a lot of the main focus was that the attention to a lot of said project was actually done practically, as Nolan is one that would not overly rely on the use of CGI and rather go more practical, which is present throughout this movie, where most of the aesthetic that may look basically look like it was done through a computer or CGI, is it likes the focus of colors and neurons and everything else to flash on the screen at certain intervals throughout the runtime, but it seemed that was also mainly more practical, with just like a little aid of the visual effects artist with some slight touch-ups here and there for some, but if it can be done in a practical manner, it will be done. And this even seen with the actual recreation of the Trinity test in the film, as it was done practically and not with, CGI aesthetic. And also, case I don't think it was an actual atomic bomb, because if it was, this would have been endless news stories about it after they shot this scene all over the round. And they probably would have had like really bad radiation or something, I don't know. And while some will complain of the explosion in said film being a lot smaller than they hoped for, I think the fact it was all done in the form of practical aesthetics makes it that little more genuine as well. You can make explosions look more bigger and better with massive amounts of artists and visual effects and all that stuff and spend so much money. I think having a more raw form of the approach works at that much more better. Now, the last aspect I will bring up about this film is in the basis of the pacing and the runtime. As in the case that some contention with said film came down to the aesthetic, in the case of a lot of movies and journals of late, that a lot of issues come about like the runtime of movies. Now, this is Nolan's longest movie today, clocking in exactly 3 hours, and it's a case that in some sense of a fair bit of the film you really do not feel the length, and in some senses you do, and this comes with a little bit of the pacing. There's no element with this, but it's more with the next two sections. I'll get into that later. It's a case with some elements of the story, it goes by a little quick on some scenes and some drag on just that slight bit, but the drag is a lot less of an issue to some regards compared to some scenes going a little too fast, when it may be points I would like to see more of them and not breeze past, but it may have been a case of not wanting to overdo the length that it already has. I'm sure it is even a case of so you could probably cut out some small bits of here and there and reduce it down just a slight bit. I'd say most cases you can probably get like 5 minutes out of it extra, but it's not way too much, and I think it's given with some of Nolan's movies, the things like pacing and other issues come into effect, but we'll get to that over in due time. But just score-wise in the presentation, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. It's just mostly some of those critiques at the end bit, but that's really all the critiques in the presentation.
Our bodies, mostly empty space. Groupings of tiny energy waves bound together.
So, in the basis of this next section with the relation to the writing of the movie, I find it is a case that it works really well with being well structured, it's focused, and it's sort of smart without feeling a bit too smart to, make people confused, the likes of all this science and political talk, that kind of thing. And the flow of dialogue and discussion feel kind of well-mannered, doesn't feel overly staged, and just feels kind of very simply easy and straightforward to follow and feel like genuine conversations, classes, or meetings of how it all comes together. And I think the writing taken from this book it is ripped from and beefed it up a bit with the writing from Nolan himself, provide a biographical epic. With one small caveat. This critique mainly relates to the likes of music as well, but it comes down to some of the sound mixing, which is an issue with a lot of his movies, as sometimes with his projects it's the case the balance of music or background noise may be amplified in scenes that overdo it that a small bit they can make some dialogue become more muffled or lower in tone and kind of effective. Now, it's not as bad as the sound mixing in his last movie of Tenet, that even the case the Blu-ray copy I got for Christmas was just, apparently the Blu-ray version of the film was just an absolute mess in terms of the audio mixing, but it could have been avoided in effect the writing aesthetic if it interrupts some scenes where characters are talking about important stuff and it can get a little muted over the movie's score, but it's only in small settings. But besides the issue, I think the writing does work well enough here, and I think that the effect from the music and sound mixing can bring it down just a little bit, and some dialogue feeling a bit odd placing, but it's probably overthinking it. In all sense, I think it's honestly really, really good and perfectly fine. So running wise, I'm going to give it an 8.5 to a 9 for that one.
Can you hear the music, Robert?
So another section I will be, of course, giving heaps of praise onto is with the score for this movie, as the film composer Ludwig Göransson created a fine piece of work with their score throughout the film, which displayed over the scenes and focus are from the combining of the visual aesthetics, make it near the body like experience some certain scenes of film, especially with the track of Can You Hear the Music, where it kind of instance where being the one that has stood the most in many of how it creates a sense of creativity, and you're going really fast and you're like kind of like getting inspired and you're just writing or working, everything like that. It's just like that kind of aesthetic of that music just works so well. Like, it's a piece of music that has like just really stuck out the most from this movie for everyone, and it works well. A lot of other films, the sense where this movie can like that mix of like sense of creativity, thinking, anxiety, and philosophical question all in like a 2-minute tracks, all stuff, and it works well for all the things. Now, of course, the score is great and all, but it also comes to the effect of the sound mixing. It can be affecting the dialogue aspect of the movie, where the music may overplay that a little bit too loud to hear the characters in discussion properly, but I think it's only really kind of once or twice for said aspect in this movie, and in more the sound effects or background aspects that affect the dialogue moments. But in an overall way, the music really helps provide some new method of seeing the world in another way, and as Kenneth Branagh's character of Niles Bohr says, "Can you hear the music, Robert?" I know for certain that I can hear it very well. So score-wise in the music, I'm going to give it a 9 to a 9.5. It's only really critiques to some small nitpicks that connect to the writing, but you get that.
I didn't expect to see you today.
Now, of course, like any film or media project, including ones with great acclaim, will also come with their own issues and problems, and this is the likes of some of these critiques. Now, I've already made some bits of mentions of the critiques in the sections already, but I'm going to just place them here to like better understand for every section, just so you're not reading through a lot of it or listening to a lot of it. So the first one, I combined both story and presentation. This is going to just be combined together as they both technically come into the effect of the one aspect as the elements of the pacing to the narrative and some bits of the runtime. The basis is that the likes of some of the pacing of the film, as I mentioned, does feel a little rushed at times, where it could have been a little bit extended or better highlight some aspects instead of overlooked very quickly, and get to some scenes that work well in the focus of length and some that may go on just a tad bit too long. However, I can't massively critique the narrative as it's very much close to the truth of how things played out. I don't know, in case I wasn't around at the time of the 1940s when this man created the atomic bomb. So with some bits of a beefed up narrative, but some aspects may have needed a little bit more time to sit and play out and not rush to the next aspect, which, seems odd for a film given that it clocks in exactly 3 hours. Because they have the time and the player reduce some element scenes that some may go on just a little bit too long. Also, one other thing I forgot to bring up for presentation was that they actually never credited a mass amount of those who helped with the small elements of the visual effects and the practical stuff, where 80% of those involved were uncredited and should have been given some praise or focus on their hard work, and hopefully they've kind of fixed that since then. But you know, I hope to see that everyone who did work on the project should be proud of their work and, you know, get the praise for it as well. Okay, next one then I'm going to focus on is just characters. This mainly comes down to some of the main group, specifically with the two leading old women, feeling that slightly underused. I think Blunt has had that little more of an effort and focus that picks up in the second half, and kind of like she has more of a screen presence compared to Florence Pugh, and even Jean may have been underutilized in some regards and maybe need to be fleshed out just a little bit more, as well. The case with both of them, just a little bit. Some of the other aspects would stem a little to the rest of the wider ensemble cast and may have some distinct names in the field and some project creation, but really have not much of a substance. But it's only really just the elements of the minor issues of the cast, as most of them still turn out some great performances overall, so it's not too much of an hassle or issue. And lastly, we're going to talk about writing and music combined together. This of course mainly comes to the effect of the aforementioned effect of the sound mixing and some elements of dialogue. That has the case of elements where, you know, the music or sound effects can over amplify some scenes of dialogue and discussions that may be hard to tell if it was important information or, you know, just a standard conversation and just shooting the breeze to add a little substance to the wider effect. I give the writing is still great and the music is excellent, but sometimes you need the balance of hearing the music on its own and then ducking the volume level so that you can focus on the dialogue at hand, and hopefully we'll see this improve with some of Nolan's following works, but I guess we'll have to see how that goes along. That's really just all the critiques I have to say about this movie, and they seem like a bit of a mouthful, but in a sense they are just very small nitpicks compared to a lot more complaints and issues of other films and projects that I've talked about in the past. But you know, we can round up this whole ordeal and see how this all comes together.
And now I am become death, destroyer of worlds.
So to round this all up, Oppenheimer is probably one of the finest pieces of biographical media films that has been made, and put to screen with the focus of detail and dedication to the man who has unbeknownst created the weapon that could destroy life as we know it, and has himself become death, the destroyer of worlds. And the focus of filmmaking from Christopher Nolan, the entire production team and the massive all-star cast, including the award-winning performances in Cillian Murphy's portrayal, is a strong testament that has a sense of spectacle, dedication, technique, and also a once-in-a-rare occasion of releasing another massive film that helps save cinema at the time of the underwhelming summer season, that both of them turned out to be this surprisingly that good. I can see the creation of this powerful time bomb was, you know, not a complete bust. So to finalize the scores and all this stuff, I'm going to give a story 8.5 to a 9, characters was an 8 to an 8.5, presentation was a 9, writing was an 8.5 to a 9, and music was a 9 to a 9.5. Giving a total score of 43 to 45 out of 50, or an 86 to a 90%. But yeah, an 86 to 90%, so an A-, that's pretty well done. Well done, Christopher Nolan, and all involved. So in all discussion, I'd like to know your own opinions on the film in particular, and want to know your thoughts on it as well. If you've seen this movie, did you like it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you indifferent or disappointed in any elements? And let me know in the comments below about your thoughts on everything. As well as case that you do not have to, of course, listen to my review, my opinions and stuff like that. You don't have to take my opinions as gospel. Especially these two ones, because they're a bit ramblings. And in all sense of things, you know, you're all entitled to your own opinions as well, and you know, as to my own, and you know, this is just my own thoughts and things. Even though it takes about a year to actually fucking do these reviews, I'm so sorry. It's been a busy thing in the head and all that shit. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed listening to my ramblings of this review, and of the other one if you've seen it already, and if you haven't already, you can check it down below, the annotations above. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me, and in this well-dashing suit, as well as the other one as well. And if you want to see more reviews from me more frequently, as well as other stuff from me, you can check out my reviews below in the description, as well as liking and subscribing, as I upload new videos every single week, and most cases I'll have a lot more reviews kind of cooking up as it is. But yeah, I'll leave it at that, and as always, I hope you all stay being wonderful people, and have a great day every day, doing many great things, and I shall see you all in the next video, in the next review. So take care, keep being you, and have a great day. Take care.